into today, there are two things that that I'd like to be able to discuss. I thought what we would do is open up with a quick roundtable, as we've done before, just getting perspective and input from each of you, your lenses, what you're seeing from your individual sector, industry. That intel, again, is just incredibly valuable to me and to others. And maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask that in a two-part question. Number one is, what's your insight about what you're seeing now, short term? Certainly as we're in this staged reopening. So over the next few weeks, what do I need to know? What do we need to watch for? What needs to be fixed? What needs to be advocated for? That would be short term. And then maybe a second part to that is, what do you see even just a little bit more medium term, moving on through this year? Anything that you're seeing, good, bad, anything that you think we should know about, just in terms of that a little bit of a longer outlook, that would be great. So we can maybe start with that, do kind of an initial roundtable. And the second thing that I would really appreciate your input on is the road forward. So, so KERT is fast approaching the end of its city council mandate, which is coming up in May. And so we really want to continue the spirit of collaboration, which I think has been really important for us over the last couple of years. Make sure we keep that going, and as we move into recovery and growth. And then how we continue to work on the issues that you've all identified that I think are critical for us. And so Craig and Amber and I have had some discussions about some potential way forward on that. We'd love to get your present that to you, and then get your input from there. So if that works for everybody, maybe we'll start with our roundtable. Maybe Susan, maybe I'll put you on the spot first. We'd love to get your input and thoughts from public health, both like immediate short term and what you see over the next few months. And we won't hold you in anything. I know we were just talking about how there's twists and turns along the way, but any insight, feelings, anything that you want to provide for us would be great.
All right, so no need to preface this with the unpredictability of COVID, because we have all lived this together. But in the short term, from a public health perspective, as you know, that the public health measures have been loosened, the restrictions have been eased. What we anticipate is that as these restrictions are eased, that we will begin to see more cases in the community, but we'll be monitoring that to see whether or not those cases in the community are, within expected ranges, and that our other partners, particularly our healthcare partners, aren't overwhelmed. And hopefully that the loosening of restrictions will proceed as the government has laid out before us, without any changes. So we'll be monitoring those indicators provincially and locally. We also are seeing incremental increases in people being vaccinated. So when Omicron first hit, just around Christmas time, there was a huge demand for vaccination. That tends to be waning a little bit, but people are still coming out for vaccines. So when we look at 12 plus, 94% of people have their first dose, and almost 91% have their second doses. So those are really encouraging numbers. And about 2/3 of those 18 and over have their booster dose. So those are very encouraging numbers locally, and I think we can take some confidence in those numbers in terms of what it means when we open up the economy in Kingston. I think we all know that there is a large segment of the population who is tired of the restrictions, and so I think we can expect in the short term to see a lot more rhetoric and divisiveness around public health measures being continued, and demands for public health measures to be completely eliminated. So I think we can expect to see more of that. In terms of the medium term, once we head into spring and we head into March and April, we tend to see the end of the respiratory virus season, as we like to refer to it in public health. So we anticipate to see less cases in the spring and the summer, assuming that COVID is going to follow the pattern that it has, and will follow the same seasonal pattern that we see with other respiratory viruses. We're still waiting, like everyone, to see what is going to happen in terms of booster for younger age groups. So the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, also known as NACI, hasn't released any statements yet. So we are waiting to hear if that is going to happen. And in the interim, we are turning some of our attention to catch up for childhood and youth immunizations, and repurposing some of the staff that we had who were delivering COVID vaccines, who are now delivering childhood immunizations and youth immunizations, and getting caught up from the years that they were missed. The other thing in terms of the medium term that we're always looking at is the other things that are happening in the community, and hoping that we're going to be able at some point to take staff from our immunization response and look at the other issues that are of concern in our community, including the opioid crisis, homelessness, what's happening in terms of healthy eating and physical activity, and the impact of the pandemic on those things, mental health. So hoping that the spring will allow us to redirect some public health resources into some other areas of concern. I think that was my short and medium term. Was there something else I was supposed to comment on? You said two things.
I know, that's great. Thanks,
Okay.
Susan.
All right.
So, and again, not holding you to anything, and I'm not going to make you speak on behalf of, public health here or in the province, but it sounds to me like you're cautiously planning or expecting to move, not maybe back to normal entirely, but more to from pandemic to endemic stage in terms of your management in the spring. Is that a fair comment at this point?
Sorry, yes, it's a fair comment that we're looking forward. I don't mean in glorious anticipation, but we are looking forward and planning for the future, always ready to, dare I say it, pivot and return to our vaccine response if that's what's required.
Susan, just another quick question. So our vaccination rates are very high. Are we still would we be one of the highest vaccination rates in the province, do we think?
That's a cautious yes from me, but I would have to go back and check with our EPI to see if we are the highest, but we have traditionally been fairly high, and especially with the third doses. So that's a cautious yes, but if people would like, I can confirm with our EPI and let you know where we rank in the province and send that out afterwards.
That's great. Thanks, Susan. Any other questions for Susan? Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Hi, Susan, and good morning, everyone. Can you give us any indication of how our region is doing right now? We all used to follow the daily case counts, and there was, lots of announcements about where we're at. And maybe a good thing that we're not doing that anymore, but just wondering if there is any sort of, I know we're basing things on hospital counts and wastewater and things like that. Is there any indication of how our region is doing right now?
So when we look at our wastewater data, you can definitely see where it's spiked, and we've certainly come down from that. We're not seeing any definitive trends because there's a lot of variability because we're a smaller community compared to the province. So it's looking fairly stable, although there have been some increases, but it's too early to tell if we're on a trend for increasing or those are just random variation that you would expect to see from day to day. In terms of our percent positivity rate, we have seen a slight increase. Again, it's early days. It's hard to see if that's a trend that we're seeing in our community that's signaling a community-wide outbreak, or if that is just, again, the day-to-day variation. We haven't seen enough of an increase or a sustained increase that we think that we need to message anything out to the community about an outbreak. So those are the end. Our hospitalization rates have been stable, which is another really important indicator. And I know it's a change from the past when we had those numbers that we had certainty on, and it feels a little bit more uncertain. But I think that looking at all of those indicators and triangulating between the three of them, we have a good sense of what's happening in the community. And I think right now what we're seeing is that the pattern is holding. But we're still waiting to see what the impact of the economy or the restrictions easing will be on the community, but we're not seeing any drastic increases that would be a cause of concern at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, thanks Tim, thanks Susan. Maybe I'll go to Sean. Sean's next on my screen. Sean, how are things looking in the hotel and accommodation sector these days?
Well, in the short term, they're still pretty slow. I think in sort of interfacing with others in the community and in other communities, we're all sort of in the same boat. Cash reserves are pretty tight. We didn't get much of a hit out of the Christmas and New Year's season, which normally helps us through. So everybody's playing things pretty close to the vest. It feels like most employers are beginning to reach back out to employees they may have laid off and are starting to do planning, which is a great sign. And I'm actually on a call later this afternoon about workforce in the region, so I'll probably would have a little bit better sense of how everybody's feeling about whether people are leaving the industry, which has been our concern for the last 2 years. It's not just about hanging on to people. People are out and out leaving tourism and restaurant and hotel. I think there's a what I would call conservative, small c conservative optimism. I really like Susan's term, glorious anticipation. I'm going to have to figure out a way to weave that into my regular conversations. But I think there's a relative amount of conservatism. I think we're all a little gun shy in our sector about forecasting and planning, which is something we normally, which is so much a part of our business cycle, is sort of anticipating and using data from the past and predicting where we're going to be. And none of that data holds true right now. So I think that's really unnerving for our sector. So, when I'm talking to other operators, a lot of them are very perplexed and as I said, very conservative with a note of optimism because they just can't see what is beyond the next hurdle. Quite obviously, we've all thought at certain points during the last couple of years that we're out of it and we're climbing and we've seen those brief periods of real success. We all believe that we'll see that hit that comes from reopening that we saw last summer, July, August, September, where that pent-up demand, particularly for leisure, was. So I think we're all predicting that there'll be strong leisure demand for Kingston going forward. And I think, Tourism Kingston would say the same thing. And I know the RTO feels the same way. Where we continue to be concerned, and particularly, kind of up until the weather turns, is not a lot of business travel. Obviously not a lot of group or event related occupancy, which is so important to Kingston in driving compression and maintaining rates. So it's going to be a relatively slow recovery for us continued. I think, to be honest, we've said this every year for the last 2 years, but I think we really are at least 6 to 8 months away from starting to see some of that business travel come back in the fall. And then I think we're probably this time next year to get back to sort of normal occupancies in the marketplace. In terms of sort of what's the road forward. I know I haven't always been able to participate in these sessions, but I find them incredibly valuable. And I find the connections incredibly valuable, and having had the chance to participate in some of the offshoots of this, I think it's in our best interest to find a way to continue to have these conversations. Maybe it's no longer on the theme of recovery, but maybe there's a good forum and a good advocacy group to support initiatives that straddle all of our different sectors and all of our different responsibilities. So you certainly find me as an enthusiastic participant as we move ahead, and certainly my goal is to be present more often as I bring my team back and can stop making beds and start worrying about what happens across the entire city and the region. So again, a long way of saying I would be very enthusiastic about continuing this process with potentially other objectives down the road.
Well, thanks, John. And again, we appreciate that perspective, appreciate your time. And yeah, we know it's been challenging being the manager and housekeeper and like frontline employee all kind of at the same time for the last while for you. So thanks for that. What I will say is that longer term discussion that we're going to have, no need to throw that out right at the beginning. We're gonna kind of prep you with some initial thoughts, and then I'll come back to you, Sean, and everybody else to kind of flush that in a bit. But for now, just your short and medium term outlook or perspective is great, and then we'll go from there. So thank you, Sean. Next on my screen is Trish. Trish, how are things going in the cultural sector? What are you seeing? What are you anticipating in the next few months?
Well, I think everybody has been very stalwart, but this last spike and change, you can tell the wear and tear on people that, we delayed performances again. And the great thing that happened during COVID was that we got very experienced in the multi-platform world. So everybody's been flexible, like the Kingston Symphony, and we helped them stream their performance. It's still not the same as live. I would say, in terms of just a finger in the wind, what is different than the fall of 2020 and the fall of 2021 is when we were allowed to have even 50% capacity. The demand was there, so we've announced the 50% capacity, but everybody our audience is being super cautious, and I don't know if it's fear of COVID or fear of, is it going to switch again? So that conservatism is actually more marked this time around, I would say. But in terms of things bouncing back, I think we're assuming that 22, 23 regular programming will happen, and 23, 24 is when the full audience will come back. It's not going to happen overnight. Very positive things have happened in terms of helping artists come out of the pandemic, punching and kicking in a great way. And with the Isabel and with the Grand Theatre, helping artists to stream, but also to record and to film, so that they're coming out of the pandemic with new materials. And that investment in creativity and innovation, I think, is going to be lasting far beyond the pandemic. So that helping local artists really create and take risks, I think that's been a very positive side of what's been happening. But it's a bit scary that the audience is so skittish, where they were not as skittish in previous openings during the pandemic.
That's a really interesting point, Trish. I'd say that anecdotally, I picked up some of that as well. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that, like in a typical venue, 50% capacity is allowed, but you're not getting 50% of the audience, that people are still.
And it's early days, because we postponed things to the end of February and then in March and April, May. But there's usually a bit of a spike once an announcement has been made, and people are like, and things like the Abrams, right? People love the Abrams, and so that's an example of that hesitation. Is the concert happening, or will I be safe? And so when our committee meets again, our Communications and Community Confidence Committee, when we're more confident through all Susan's team's work to be making that announcement that we're open for business. I think that open for business will need to come through once the stats are showing that it is safer, but there needs to be another boost of that message.
That's good feedback, Trish. That's good for us to know, because like you said, we've been through this cycle so many times that sometimes we wonder, like, how much do we need to locally amplify the message with that provincial reopening? But I think what I'm hearing from you is that there's still a need for that. So that's good.
Can I come out of my cave yet? Is kind of what the public is.
Yeah, for sure. No, I hear you. That's really good. Super. Thanks, Trish. Next is Pavna. Pavna, how are you doing? How are things in the nonprofit and social services sector?
We have passionate people in working in the front line, and I think that's carrying us through a lot of this weariness and exhaustion. We do have some serious things to focus on that I'll talk about in a minute. But firstly, the good news, Ontario legislation, Queen's Park has declared next week as the first week of appreciation of not-for-profit frontline workers. So this is our chance to give a shout out to these unsung invisible heroes who every day get up and serve meals and deal with behaviors that most of us couldn't. So this is our chance. We certainly will be doing some social media around this, but just so everyone knows, February 14th to the 20th. In the short term, we're obviously focusing on the immediate needs. And as the city well knows, a small percentage of the population consumes a lot of energy and time and effort because they really do have complex needs. And a lot of attention right now is how can we support them? And we're learning as we go how much we need to segment because everyone's situation, everyone's journey to where they are is different. Addictions, mental health, the complexity of their behavior, the violence. We are a community with a lot of crystal meth, which does change how people behave very quickly. And so, again, that's something that everyone's working collectively, public health, the city, the United Way, all the agencies coming together to find ways through this. It feels like patchwork, but it's not really, because as we're going through this, we're learning more intensely what the solutions are for different segments of the population, subgroups, how do we deal with them, what are their needs, what is the best way of building trust. Through this, we are seeing some more people being housed that were never even accessing services before. So it works, but we now have to build it into the system. And so the Homelessness Collective Impact Committee that Susan and I chair and the United Way facilitates, that's something we're really focusing on, and how do we actually serve people the way they need to be served, or how they would respond best to being served. Medium term and future, one of the things that's really evident, all sectors are facing burnout and staff shortages. But what we also realize is it's bubbled to the surface a few things that we're dealing with. One of them is how do we deal with the staff shortage? Because there was a time when we had the space and the funding. Ironically, we had enough funding for some additional services, but we couldn't get the staff to actually run it because there weren't enough staff. So I think what we're looking at is actually we've started working very closely with St. Lawrence College, and we started discussion about how can we help them get their students ready so they can hit the ground running. Usually there's a period lost in training and orientation, and sometimes a lot of students are petrified at what they see and they may not make this a career. So how do we get them acclimatized and do it in an intentional way? So you're really using the placements in a more strategic way. And we've had great discussion with Dr. Louise Chatterton, who's the Dean of Business and Social Service. She's very excited with this, and she's building a framework that we'll work together on, just to make sure that we provide them with the opportunities and that we get them ready for a career. The other thing is it's also exposed the inequities in the system, because what we found is that the pay scale in some agencies is so low that they can actually go to retail and make more money. So we really need to do a little bit better than that, because we're expecting people with training and experience to go to undertake some really critical needs and services. So how do we keep them engaged? And the city and the United Way, we've started conversations, and I know our board has had some intense conversations about how can we have some kind of compensation framework, and how can we as funders stop worrying so much about the little nitty-gritty of which program is better because it costs less, and really have a paradigm shift about funding programs and making sure that our staff in our frontline agencies are actually paid not just a living wage, but compensation equivalent to their qualifications and the needs of the program. So that's going to be a whole long-term shift and change, and it will require some additional investment in our agencies to help them. Some of the agencies aren't bad, but even within a ministry or government-funded agency, you could have some programs funded at a lower rate than others. So we really need to bring some equity into a system that works on, ironically, on inequity, and we have this within the system itself. So that's a long-term piece. The capacity building is another one, and our partner agencies have really embraced the equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigenization. So they have worked with us, and we've got some committees going on how we can help them. So we've actually contracted with two sets of consultants for 2 projects. One is helping understand what the agencies are, where they are in their journey, because some are very advanced and some are just starting and don't know where to start. Doing an environmental scan, and then with that scan, we'll figure out which agencies need extra capacity building and how can we help them get there, and including ourselves as the United Way. And then the second one is around data collection. So the social identity data collection is really important. And that is really going to help our board and other funders make informed decisions. We know it's a focus of funders. So how can we help our agencies with that capacity to learn to collect data in a meaningful way? So we've actually been very fortunate in getting a consultant who worked with the United Way of Toronto, the LIN in Toronto, and the City of Toronto, who's done this with pilot agencies in Toronto. And we're going to start that project in the spring, where we'll have a smaller group of agencies. And through that, we'll build communities of practice so they can share their learnings with each other, so we can expand out. Because data is really important, and we really need to understand the needs of the people being served with real data. And so that's a really exciting project. Actually, ABBA sicked us on to Tana Turner, who'll be running that project. And we've just signed all the paperwork, and so these are 2 projects that are underway. Another one now, we've been so reactive and responsive to what's happening on the ground. We're now starting to think again about prevention. And so one of the projects that we're looking at is a pilot project. We will be sending some media releases and stuff out about this, but we've been able to secure funding for Family and Children's Services to run a pilot. Is part of the transformation of the child welfare program. This pilot is focusing on children 0 to 6 and their families, and how do we keep our children safe and not entering necessarily the child welfare system. So that's a big project that we're all kind of grappling with. It's a pilot, so we have some room for experimentation. And so I'll stop there. There's lots more, but I think that's a quick summary of short and long and medium term.
Thanks, Paul. That's a great update. And your enunciation of some of the workforce issues on pay equity and on staffing and burnout, and the program with St. Lawrence College, that I think we need to see more of that in different sectors, and just getting right in there and working on that pipeline. So that's great to hear about the initiatives going on there. Thank you. Okay, next I'm going to go to Tim. Tim, how are things going in the restaurant sector?
Good, exhausting, but good. Anyway, it's nice to have people back in our restaurants for sure. This latest wave has been a real challenge in many different ways, both financially, obviously, and mentally hard on our staff, particularly. We had a positive summer. We had a great beginning of the fall, and then just to have this wave come along and sweep it all away again, and have to lay so many people off again, and all of that. Something a little positive, I guess, that's come out of that is in an industry, we're really looking at how to address the mental health of our staff in a more profound way, and looking to different programs to do that, EAP programs, et cetera. And I know through the United Way, there's an EAP program that's been sponsored for a year for all businesses. Some businesses have benefits that already have it, but even beyond that, in terms of just how we don't believe our staff have to check their issues at the door. That's not how you do things anymore, that they're real and that we have to focus on them and deal with them. So that, that's a big thing for our industry. But back to sort of the financial side of things, the government subsidies, kind of the original subsidies, ended right when the new wave started. So that was, odd timing. I wish they just kept them going, because unfortunately the latest programs leave out a lot of businesses. They THRP with a 12-month requirement for 40% loss leaves out a lot of restaurants. And unfortunately, several of my locations, one has a 39.84% loss. So we're out due to being at 0.15 of a percentage, and losing 39% is the same as losing 40. Anyway, that's just an anecdote for me, but I'm sure it's the same anecdote for a lot of other restaurants as well. It's nice that the local lockdown program, the portal has been open for that. So that's 3 months of not having to have that 40% loss, prior 12-month loss, and a current period rate of 25%. So now the government's added another month to that, which is good as well. So, and that includes all businesses. So you don't have to be a hospitality business to benefit from this. So I guess my hope and concern is that everyone's aware of that. And I think, our agencies, KEDCO and the BIA and Tourism Kingston and CAP are doing a great job of informing their members of all of these programs. And I also have to say kudos to those agencies for recognizing the importance of shopping local, and they're doing a great job of promoting hospitality right now. And so we're very lucky to be in this city with organizations like that can help us. Medium term, I feel fairly positive. I think, once the weather starts to shift and people feel, I echo Tricia that I think a lot of people are still very uncertain, and, a little more certainty would really help in terms of business right now and going into the spring. And to echo what Sean had to say, we're not seeing the daytime business. There's no people down in the offices, so lunches are really slow. We're seeing good weekends, which is positive. So, I think medium term we're gonna do okay. I hope we have a summer like last summer, and that this goes away in the next fall and just doesn't come back and do the same thing. But I guess that's it. I mean, this has just been a really challenging 2 years, but it's been eye-opening, and there are some positives that I see out of it. But the recovery is going to be long. There's been deep losses, and who knows? There's that uncertainty out there as well. But that's it for me, I guess.
Tim, no, that's a great update. Really, really good intel. Just a quick question for you. Something else that Sean had said was, because of all the twists and turns in your industry, that some people have just chosen to just leave it altogether. Are you seeing that? Or are you seeing kind of that people are engaged and optimistic? And what are you seeing?
Well, it was more challenging in the fall to find staff and last summer. So I think we lost a lot of people initially, sort of in some of the earlier waves of the pandemic. So we were really challenged to we had to be closed certain days in the summertime just because we couldn't staff our businesses, and that was across the board for a lot of other industries as well. But we're starting to see a trickle back now, which is good, especially in the kitchen, because that was the hardest part. I think people are either they left for a while and decided they wanted to come back, or we're getting a lot of out of town interest in kitchen jobs as well. So people looking to relocate, from Toronto or bigger cities. So that has started to come back. It's still not where it needs to be, but it's always been challenging, even before COVID. But last summer was a real pinch for a lot of industries. But I don't know if it's the same, that people are coming back in other sectors, but I feel like they are.
No, thanks, Tim. That's great. And yeah, I'd be interested to just hear how that develops, and for each of you, just comment a bit more out of town interest in jobs. That's an interesting thing to kind of keep our eye on as well. So thank you. Thanks for that. Abba, have you next. How are you doing? How are personal services industries and businesses managing these days? What do we need to know right now and in a couple months ahead?
Sure. Morning, everyone. I feel like it's been forever. How are we doing? I think, it's been difficult for us, especially with the last series of, as everybody has already kind of stated, it probably would have been better for personal services for us to be closed versus having 50%, given that we had so many restrictions with respect to what we could do. January is generally a month where we do facials and those types of cozy services, and we can do many things that remove mask. And I mean, there are not many people doing Brazilian waxing and pedicures in the middle of December and January. And so for us, that required us trying to really do a fine line of juggling between laying people off and trying to maximize whatever other things that were available to us. And I think staff were really also kind of tired by this round. The ones that we have who have been great are holding on, but I think there are a lot of people who have been echoed before, have just moved on to different industries that are more stable, because the past 2 years have been such a fluctuation for us. I mean, the year before we were closed for 6 months. And so I think people need stability in their life. And this has impacted definitely kind of the workforce and where we're getting it. And it's already a very small pool, particularly in Kingston. And so that has presented itself with challenges. And I think, again, that's been said before in terms of messaging. I think even though we were open and we were able to do some services, we also had the messaging of like, we're working from home, stay safe, and so there was a very tentative kind of attitude between people coming out and wanting to support. And so I think, so that really kind of inhibited our progress. I would say it's been, even within Kingston, it's been quite interesting to see the differences between the two locations. Our downtown location, which is usually very busy because we usually have students or we have visitors or people visiting, have been very quiet. Like you walk the streets and it's like, what's happening? Whereas the West End location, it's been very steady, and even a demand for capacity is there because I think people are driving and maybe getting there, and they don't mind parking and going definitely to the destination. So it's been quite interesting to see just within the city the differences between the two locations. So we've had to, which has been good, we can move some staff to the West End so that they're able to get work, and we can then also provide for that need. I think coming into spring, I think people are getting anxious. We're seeing the phones, like we're bringing back people and staff, and the phones are ringing and appointments are coming in. So there's definitely kind of a yearning. People are kind of getting it's spring coming itch, and we want to do something. And that's very, very, good to see. I think we're being, again, very cautious still because we don't know what that means, and just trying to plan so that we could maximize things. And so last year we were able to use things like the outdoor space. And I think we're going to try to see how we could maximize those things so that we can cater to people who may still be tentative to those needs. And so, using the creativity that we've been able to develop. But I think overall in personal services, it has been very difficult in terms of staffing, making sure that there is that long-term stability in a job, and the messaging and getting people to spas, and hopefully that things are kind of trying to build up as we go into spring and summer. And again, with respect to funding, because many places, though we were closed for 6 months, everyone wanted to do something in the summer. So I think most personal services did well. So again, just like Tim, maybe we were like 38%. So we didn't get any funding, especially when we needed it in this fourth wave. And then because we weren't locked down, we didn't get a lockdown subsidy. Though we didn't really have any traffic that would merit having spaces open during that time between December and January 31st. And so I guess hopefully that, most of the places can take advantage of these, energy and other things that are in place. But again, those costs are very minimal compared to the whole cost of running the business. But again, being positive that things seem to be looking brighter as we go ahead. And again, just echoing everyone that this is definitely a long-term, in terms of a monetary and economic stability, a long-term coming, because we've all had to take on a lot of debt to cover to make sure that we're still here today. So I think just being mindful when programs and things are happening, that it's not that when things get better in the summer that it's going to be better, but the recovery for all the things that we've been in between may be like a 3 to 5 year process, so.
No, thanks, Anna. That's I totally hear you on that. I agree. So that's great input. You and I had spoken briefly about just even understanding what services would open up through the different stages of reopening. Is there a little bit more clarity for personal services, what you can do when, or?
Thanks for reminding me. I forgot that. But I think also the messaging, I think part of the challenge for us is that we have to be able to plan. And, we can't plan with an announcement 2 days before. We have to be able to bring staff back. We have to let them know so that if they have to arrange childcare or whatever else, that those things are in there. And so it's very frustrating because it's not like it's our first rodeo. Like we've been doing this for 2 years now. And so I think the challenge for us is that, we get these announcements. It's a 3-stage reopening plan, but there were no details. So we had no idea. We called public health, we called the ministry, we called everybody that had a number, and they were like, wait for the announcement. And so for us, we would like to let our customers know so that maybe we can get an uptake of things and know what our bookings may look like. And we were not able to do that until 2 days prior to the 31st, where there was like, well, this is what you can do for personal services. And so I think just, when these statements are made and dates are planned, I think there needs to also be subsequent and concurrent planning of here is exactly what that means for each industry so that we can all prepare, so that we can know what food to buy and how much stock we need to have and or not have, and how many people we need to come in and how they can prepare. And so I think there's a lack of foresight as to what it actually entails to ramp a business up whenever these or ramp a business down, conversely, whenever these announcements are made. So
No, I thank you. I could not agree more with that. So we can continue to make that point with our provincial government counterparts for sure. Thank you. That's great, Hava. So maybe I'll go next to Karen. Karen, what are you hearing from your members? Is there anything that confirms, what's been said in the discussion? Anything new? Any added insights that you're hearing from across the community?
I would say what I'm hearing from our membership base is it echoes what everyone is saying so far, from Abba's comments to Tim to Sean's. It's optimistic, and again, I love Susan's statement too. I'm going to try and steal that one too, Sean, if I can work that into my verbiage. But it is very optimistic. A lot of conservancy to Tim's point about we need to be planning ahead, and we really just don't know how to plan ahead. And I can speak as a chamber. We're a small business as well, and we've been wearing many hats. We've had 2 staff for the last year and a half trying to run the organization. So Sean was saying making beds. We're doing the same thing. We're trying to make bank deposits, but we're not being able to forecast where we really want to take the organization. So I think it's the same messaging that you're hearing from all the other sectors. And I'm hearing it from retail as well. Staffing is the other concern. Are they coming back? It'd be interesting to hear, Tim, what you learned from your meeting, or was it Sean was having the meeting this afternoon? Sorry, Sean, with workforce. Are they coming back to the industry? Are they changing course? There's those things, but really that's what we're hearing the most. We continue to help try and support the push Love Local, Love Kingston, Shop Local. If you haven't heard yet, we have launched a partnership with Spearhead for a Love Kingston beer. So that's coming out next week, with 25 cents of that sale going to a fund for shop local businesses. And again, it's not a huge piece like the city and economic development pushed, but it'll be a small piece. And we're continuing. Rapid testing kits is still a program that we're running. Our MOU with the ministry ends at the end of March. We do have our shipment has arrived Friday night, so we're trying to do the backlog. We have about 560 businesses who are backlogged that we're trying to push through in the next couple of weeks. We reopen the distribution center on the 14th. And again, with the announcement from government this week that they're going to start pushing through grocery stores and pharmacies for personal use. So we're not sure how that's going to affect businesses, where I know where Tim comes to pick up his supply. It's a big box that Tim needs for his 4 locations. That's not going to help coming through a grocery store or a pharmacy, so we need to have that support for business, and we just don't know if that's still going to play out. Our call Wednesday with ministry still couldn't help us support that. So we're very hopeful that we're going to still be able to support our community with the rapid testing for our businesses. It looks like reporting, which will make Tim and the rest of the group here that are using the kits, the reporting piece looks like it might be going away, that you just need to take them and use them with your staff as you see fit. And it looks like also from that program, making it easier for businesses, which is a nice thing, that you're going to get the 5 kit pieces, not the 25 kits per box. It'll be a little bit easier for you to manage with your staffing. So in a nutshell, we're hearing the same things that you are all saying, and positively optimistic.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Appreciate that. That's good to know. Allison, maybe I'll go to you next. From the tourism sector, any news, added insights, anything you think that we should be on our radar that we haven't yet discussed this morning?
Sure. I don't have a lot to add. I don't want to repeat what Sean and Tim has already covered, but I can share maybe some data just to kind of shore up those insights. So I pulled some occupancy stats, for example. So, mid-January occupancy for Kingston was around 20%. So that's quite low. I mean, pre-pandemic, we would normally be in, the sort of early 50%, like 52, 54%. But for the most recent week that I have access to, which is the week ending February 5th, we're at 37.8%. So certainly that's trending in the right direction, but still low and doesn't, make up for January or even December, as Sean was saying, in terms of those Christmas and New Year's losses. I will say from a marketing perspective, we have put our winter campaign back into market. We did that a little bit before the reopening occurred, sort of anticipating that coming. And we also have been running our Kingstonlicious programming as well to support the restaurants. And all the indicators that I have access to are that these are trending in the right direction. So we're seeing a lot of web traffic, for example, around both of those things. So the winter program, just for those who don't know, it provides a $100 Visa card for each night stay. So it's a minimum 2 night, but you get $200, 3 nights, 300, 4 nights, 400, 5 nights, $500. So really trying to incentivize those winter visits to the city. In terms of website traffic, for the last 2.5 weeks, so a little bit before the reopening and through the reopening, we're actually outpacing 2019 numbers by 14%. So we're hopeful that will actually transfer into real business for our partners. And we're also seeing referrals to hotels are up about 500% over 2019 for the same period. So again, we'll take these small wins that we can. We're hopeful that maybe we'll have a better February than we thought we may have, and that we can sort of lay a path spring through summer. That's specifically leisure. That doesn't speak to the business market that Sean was speaking about, or even the sporting events and tournaments that are still very much missed in these winter months and are really important for our partners.
Well, thanks, Allison. Yeah, that's great to know. I appreciate that. Really good intel. Mary Jo, anything from you on what you're hearing from other downtown businesses, retailers, anything to confirm or to add to anything we've chatted about so far this morning?
Same as Allison, I don't want to repeat everything that has been said by my members. All I can say is yes, plus more. Everybody's feeling the same way. The thing that we're noticing is there's a couple of forgotten industries, and ABBA is one of them. It's personal services and retail. This time around were reduced in their abilities to succeed, but they weren't. They had no support, and on top of it, the people that would be normally using those services, including entertainment in there, are in their very much a super cautious mode now that things are open. So that creates a little bit of a perfect storm for a very, very slow start for those industries. I would also agree, I was just on another call before this talking specifically about, and I used the word deep. So it was interesting, Tim, that you used that same word, deep financial, emotional, and physical recovery. This isn't, let's get through this year. This is 3 to 5 years, as Abba said. And I really hope that we still see the same people around the table in 5 years. In terms of what we're doing on our end, the main focus at the BIA office right now is prepping for the summer. So we've got some excellent summer plans for Celebrate the Summer, which is this year's version of LKM, and increasing pedestrian counts currently as well as moving forward. And just to give people a little bit of hope, again, it's sort of a stat to help people know that some good things are happening. back in January, the low point of pedestrian counts in downtown, and these are based on a 24-hour pedestrian count, laser pedestrian counter on the corner of Princess and King. The low point in January 17th, which was a very cold week, was 273 pedestrians on that corner. The low point now, or on February 3rd, the low point now is 697. So we've almost doubled. The high point was two high points during these periods, 1,040 on January 22nd, which was the first day of Impulse. And then February 5th, there were a number of things that happened. We had students come back, the restaurants opened, and Impulse, of course, was in the square, and we had beautiful weather, and our pedestrian counts went up to 1,700. So from 273 to 1,700 in 3 weeks is really, really good news. We're definitely headed in the right direction. So that's what we're concentrating on. And it's painful to watch, but to watch our members. At the same time, when I see Tim, I've been on many meetings with Tim in the last little while. He's heard me say many of the pedestrian counts, but he's always smiling and he's always saying, oh, well, yeah, here we go. Yep, so that always makes me feel a little bit better. Like, okay, nobody's crying, or they're not in my presence anyway. Everybody's up for the challenge. So that gets me up and going to work every day.
Well, thanks, Mojo. That's very, very well said. And I really appreciate I love doing these roundtables because of the themes that come out give me a really good sense of where we're at as a community in our different sectors. And so, cautious optimism, at the same time, lots of work ahead, what that recovery looks like, but definitely some good signs. Definitely on that consumer confidence piece, that's really, really good feedback as well. And just what that tells me in terms of messaging to the community and how to work on that. So that's great. Thank you. Really appreciate everybody's input. Anything else? Any other additional points we've missed before we go on? Okay. So that, Karen, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to mention, there's something we're just starting to work on now, and it's being pulled together. Again, comments from the membership base and businesses in general is staffing. So they've asked if we could look at doing a hiring summit. So we are working towards a hiring summit, working with some of our different partners, SLC, Queens, Keys, those hiring groups. So it is set for April 28th, and we're looking at different concepts as to having an area with speakers, area with booths, with almost like a trade show type of environment with businesses who are looking for employees, and then opportunities for job seekers for an educational piece too on what could be out there. So we're just in the middle of that. I didn't want to not share that. I don't have a lot of details right now. Jessica's just pulling together the pieces and where we're going to actually be hosting that event, and hopefully it will be a live event because it makes more sense to be able, and then having opportunities for employers to actually meet with potential employees with a potential new staff. So that is in the works as well.
Thanks for mentioning Kate back there. That sounds like a great event for sure. Be happy to spread the word and help support that for sure. So Trish, go ahead.
Karen, if you need to do some pre-filming and you need some help, let me know. If there's some messaging, we've got a busy April, but if there's some filming that would be helpful, we're happy to help.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so very much, Tricia. We'll be in touch. I'm already working with your group on the other offer you gave us, so thank you. Okay.
Thanks, folks. So that takes us to the second piece of work on our agenda this morning, which is to talk now more about the road ahead for KERT and the work that we've done so far. So maybe just to remind you all, I think it was May of 2020 when we first launched this. And I don't know if you guys remember when I first called you individually and asked you to be a part of this group, and maybe you kind of cursed that day and didn't know exactly what you were getting yourselves into. So I just want to say, first of all, just how much I've appreciated working with all of you, the input, the collaboration, I think has been an incredible message. I think a message of reassurance to our community that as we face challenges, that we've been working on them together. And I think that the insights we've been able to share have been incredible. Just even the discussions that we just had this morning, just incredibly valuable for me. So when we had initially set up KERT, it was for a year. And then, I think we all agreed that, this pandemic has gone on much longer than maybe we anticipated. And so we went to City Council and asked for a year extension. And so that's now coming up to May. So that will be 2 years. And so what I'd like to have a bit of a discussion on is what things look like after KERT in this current structure expires, because I think we can all agree, I think that if collaboration has been the key to our success during the pandemic, I think it's going to continue to be a key to our success through this 3 to 5 year recovery. Abba, as you discussed, as we continue to grow, as we continue to face challenges that are ahead of us, and then how we can continue to advance the work on the issues that I think that we've identified right over this last year. So consumer confidence, it's an issue right now. It may very well continue to be an issue. So how do we advance that? Workforce, no question, that's going to be a huge issue to continue to manage and work on. Underrepresented groups, how to continue to advance that work, or EDI work, making sure that employment opportunities are available to everyone in our community. And then, of course, funding and advocacy, and how we can work together to track grants and get more money into our community to help our businesses. So I think those are the 4 working groups that we've established. And so even after KERT expires, I think we can all agree those issues are still really important. And so what I'd like to do, if I can, is turn things over to Craig. Craig and I have had some discussions. He's done some thinking at his end about how we can continue this work, even if it's in a different form, and how we'd love to have all of you continue to be involved. So I know that each of you are really, really busy and you've got lots of other things on the go, but we want to make sure there continue to be opportunities where we can work together, because I think your insights and ideas and creativity are going to be just as important in the months ahead as they've been over the last 2 years. So maybe that, by way of introduction, Craig, if I can pass things over to you, and we'll take things, let you know what we're thinking, and then we'd love to solicit feedback from the group.
That's great. And thank you very much, Mayor Patterson. And I would just echo your thanks to all of the members, not just of the steering committee, but to all of the working groups. The collaboration has just been extraordinary. The value, the input, the insights for me and my teams, but I think across the city have been really exceptional. So I put together a few slides based on conversations I had the other day. Sorry if they're a little bit rushed. It was sort of a stream of thought as I was working on this early this morning to develop the slides, but I think I've tried to capture much of what the mayor's referenced and layered in a few extra thoughts. I've actually several slides I've sort of framed as questions because I have thoughts, but again, this is meant to be sort of a draft document, and it really requires your insights and best advice. So you're all aware the purpose of our KERT model was rapid response to changing pandemic conditions, really to plan and coordinate short-term response, but also longer-term strategies to address the impacts of the pandemic. And again, the mayor just referenced that sort of community-level coordinated and aligned approach that has been really quite incredibly successful, and is definitely something that I would like to see continue. But this model of survival, recovery, and growth as sort of the three components. Of course, the issue is that this recovery has been and certainly continues to be very uneven across sectors. Some sectors, and looking at data, are actually at or above pre-pandemic employment levels and output and growth. Other sectors are still struggling, I think, to actually get from survival to recovery. And obviously that's very troubling. and again requires that we continue to pay attention and address them. I think one of the things that, again, I have to be mindful, I look at things in very much economic terms. It's all of you can add some additional layers, but from an economic perspective, the gaps that we've seen in many segments of society have grown. Between skilled and unskilled, young and old, male and female, and this again requires, if we're going to be resilient as a community, we have to continue to address these very important issues. We also have to be, I think, mindful that some of the disruptions are going to be permanent. So remote work, the discussion within our own corporation, within the city, is ongoing about the role of remote work, and it's not easy. It's there's irritants and there's challenges with remote work, and the return to from remote work, and how do you do hybrid work? Certainly, e-commerce, without a doubt, it was here, now it's here in force. Reskilling and upskilling, I think, take on a much more important role, in the role of micro credentials and on the job training and upskilling. One of the things that I found most fascinating is the role and importance of support services. Always been important. Certainly wasn't directly on my economic development radar, but childcare is now an economic development issue. It is a massive barrier for many returning to the workforce, and is impacting our productivity and our GDP. So again, as we've started to understand the interconnectivity of our economy, or be reminded, perhaps a better word, of the interconnectivity, how do we start to think at a systems level, understanding how everything relates to one another, and how do we work better? So in terms of next steps, how do we continue to the great work of KERT, again, by recognizing that as we reopen, we still have challenges. One of the things I'm very interested in, and maybe this is not everybody's concern, but how does the KERT work align with the other strategies, in particular the integrated economic development strategy? One of the observations I would make, to add to yours, was that the government, the federal government and province indirectly, have injected a massive amount of money into our economy over the last 2 years, critically needed to ensure that our total economy doesn't collapse. But as this starts to be withdrawn, it needs to be replaced by private sector growth. And Kingston, there was just some good news yesterday about our population growth, and the city's seen some very important assessment growth during our last budget, which really helped us keep the line on tax rates and keep it to a minimum. But again, how important is that we drive job creation and investment into our economy to sort of fill that government subsidy gap? What I'm suggesting is sort of a 3-component plan. The first component is valuation. I think it's always important when you conduct a project or carry out an initiative that you evaluate, what did we learn? These are just a few thoughts. I think there needs to be actually a nice sort of whiteboarding session or some sort of facilitated session where we get together and sort of share our observations and thoughts. Because again, these are the things that will make us stronger and more resilient to other disruptions. And again, just sort of echoing some of the observations from both the mayor and all of you, we've seen a substantial increase in integration and collaboration, both across sectors, but also across organizations. And I think that is so exciting to my job as partnerships. So I'm really excited about that. Improved communications, not just at a strategic level, but also very much at an operational level. And again, shout out to our friends at Public Health and working together to get information out. Greater recognition of the changes faced by many of our community. Again, the precarious employment, that segment of our economy was there, but unfortunately maybe it wasn't seen as much, and now it has certainly been. Need to examine resilience, the role of social supports in infrastructure. Some of our safety net was not so safe. Certainly there's a lot of discussion now about the capacity issues with our healthcare system and why we haven't been able to respond. But again, those are big issues. I always think that leadership plays such an important role, and that's why the mayor, I know, reached out to all of you as leaders across your sectors. But again, part of, if we can look back for any sort of nuggets of success, it has been around how people across the community have stepped up to be leaders. And my mind immediately leaps to Elaine Ma and her incredible leadership for vaccination. But there are others. There's just so many that across our community. Again, I'm a bit of a data nerd, so I would say the critical role of data and the use of data, I think, has been heightened as we try to understand our own unique world within the broader context of the province and the nation and the world, and that notion of system level thinking, how everything fits together as a puzzle. The second component would be the transition. And again, this is just my thinking. How do we capitalize on these lessons learned and sort of transition or translate those priorities and themes of KERT into more permanent processes and structures? And, you know, we're very fortunate within my group to have very well aligned sort of activities. So the KERT advocacy and grant development, we absolutely want that to continue. You know, the work that Troy Beharry, some of you know Troy is our star grant development person at the city. You know, the way we started to approach almost all of our applications now as a city is as an opportunity to build a system, a community-wide approach by calling on many of you to be partners and others across our community. So how do we continue that and create the Kingston Advocacy and Grant Development Working Group that would work in collaboration with myself and Troy to make sure that the advances we've made continue and expand. Certainly with the work of the systemically disadvantaged or underrepresented groups and the workforce development, they've sort of combined and I think in a great creative way. We will be announcing very shortly the sort of a relaunch of the Kingston Workforce Development Strategy. And I think we're going to be doing a refresh. I think it's needed. It's 5 years in and with a lot of successes, but the world has changed dramatically. And for me, everything I'm hearing from not just you, but from across the community is it's about the workforce. And it's going to be about the workforce for some time. COVID has its impacts, but there were lots of factors pre-pandemic, baby boomers exiting and retiring, so many factors that are impacting. So as we sort of refresh the workforce development, bringing in new partners. So I would say the biggest thing personally for me out of this whole process is I've met a bunch of people who are incredibly passionate and skilled, who weren't part of some of my initiatives, and how do we bring you in and create a working group within the structure of the workforce development strategy. And again, there's some already very well aligned working groups that we'll be restarting. The third is the community confidence, and again, I would echo the mayor's observation of the critical role of that, not just in the immediate term, but in the longer term. And how do we create a strategic marketing and communications advisory group at the city? My group is looking more and more towards strategic marketing, and certainly our communications and community engagement is very strong and growing. How do we facilitate a table that would have many of you and others around it to build on our sort of success over the last 2 years? The last piece I think is always important is recognition. How do we recognize and celebrate the work of the individuals and organizations that emerged during this pandemic? I think of Lionhearts. I'm sure we could literally go around and put together a list of 50 organizations and probably 100 people that have really distinguished themselves as critical to our community's resilience during these last 2 years. What can this process of recognition do to maybe change or build new behaviors across our community? How can they inspire? Again, this isn't my area of expertise, but I think there's an incredible opportunity here to recognize, but also grow a next generation. Part of the business of the city is social impact. We were just in the midst of the Mayor's Innovation Challenge. It's a very innovation focused, but what we're seeing is young people who just are so excited about creating impact. And that's now sort of got down into the high school level. How do the leaders that have sort of shone over the last 2 years, how do they inspire the next generation of leaders and innovators in our community? So again, just a quick few slides. I've talked fast, but perhaps I'll just leave this sort of slide up as a talking point, but perhaps I'll hand it back to you, Your Worship, and would happily answer any questions. Maybe I'll stop so we can actually see each other's faces. There we go. Always welcome input or thoughts.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for that. Thoughts, input from the group. Trish.
This is really great. And I wonder in the evaluation, what would be really helpful is that we completely reframed our industries and our sectors, right? What was the previous framing and what is the new framing? And that has determined different priorities. So we've come out very differently than we would have come into the pandemic, but that the kind of articulation of the reframing of our sectors would be really, really helpful. And that really will give input into priorities going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trish. Other comments? Allison.
I was just going to comment on the recommendation about a strategic marketing and communications advisory group or committee. I think there's some synergies with a group that's already been meeting, and we literally this week we were having a discussion around the terms of reference for this communications group that does include public health and the chamber and DBIA and KEDCO and Tourism Kingston that meets bi-weekly. So maybe there's a way to look at how that group gets merged into this process, because we're having that conversation of it's been really helpful. We started out of the need to meet and collaborate around COVID, but we see a longer term value for continuing those meetings. So
That's great, Allison. That's exactly the kind of feedback we're looking for. We want to make sure that we're aligning, not duplicating, but how do we fortify work that's already happening, and how do we lay that foundation going forward? That's great. Comments?
Hi, Craig. That's awesome. I think the only comment I had is that the working groups are great, but I feel that you might also miss kind of what we're learning by integrating and having a conversation as a bigger group with all the different sectors. So I'm not sure what type of group that is, but I feel that there's value in that. Otherwise, we end up going back into silos where people are doing kind of their all individual work, but there's no communication of that within each other's boundaries. And I think that this in itself has been a very good use of space and time and information and ideas that one may not have normally gotten if you were within those. So I think perhaps some sort of a working group that incorporates continuing this broader spectrum so that ideas can be filtered through from the groups and passed back along through the groups as to what's been happening would be my only other suggestion.
That's a great suggestion.
I agree. Abba, that's a great suggestion. Super. Pavna.
So yes, I agree with Abba about the collaboration and having some kind of group like this sounding board. It really helps, because while we're talking about economic recovery or development, it's also there. For example, social services is an important component, as is public health. Since Craig, so a couple of comments. One is, I think the group around funding and advocacy, what we're sort of understanding is it's a lot about government relations more than advocacy. So I just wonder if that could be a friendly kind of amendment to look at what that would look like, because it's really about relationship building and finding opportunities that way. And the other thing I was just wondering was, since you're such a data and evidence-based, how would you know you're successful in 3 years, 2 years by setting up the structure?
That's great, and I think we need to set some goals, some targets. Certainly, we've got some sort of right now, I think there's, I don't know if I was an economist, a young economist, I think there would be a field day for master's and doctoral dissertations about pre-pandemic, pandemic, and post-pandemic analysis of the economy. We do have a lot of that data, and we're already we've been doing sort of pre-pandemic versus pandemic analysis on the local economy. But yeah, how do we measure what is the vision? We have an economic strategy. Obviously job growth is one metric, GDP is another, but getting more specific would be helpful as well. So that's a very, very good point.
Excellent. Great feedback. Anybody else? Thoughts, comments? Susan, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thanks. And thanks for that presentation, Craig. Lots of really great thoughts. You always impress me with how you can take lots of information and organize it in such a very easy to understand manner. The one thing I would add, if we're going to talk about indicators and evaluation, and I know we're kind of far from there, but just to plant the seed that I think if we're talking about economic development, I think we need to talk about healthy economic development. And what I heard today on the call was the impact, the deep impact that this has had on the mental health of individuals who have been retained in certain industries, but also, the mental health of people who can no longer deal with the flux of being laid off and called back. And so I think there's a case to be made that we need to think about our economy in the community as a healthy economy. And what are some of those other indicators that we should be considering as we move forward as well?
And that's a great comment. I would also add a lot of the work we're doing right now is around inclusive economic development. So how do we start to change the frame of just thinking about just GDP or just unemployment rates, but look to inclusive measurements? It's interesting. I haven't updated any of the working groups because we've been so busy on a project with Queens to build out a sort of a resiliency dashboard for our community, and it's moving along quite well. We're probably a month away from having something to share in early form. But one of the things we're finding is that there's a lot of very interesting data sets that the different groups help tell their story of how the impacts of the pandemic, but beyond that. And so to your point about health indicators showing impact on our communities, resilience is important. Inclusivity, obviously economic stuff is sort of a standard approach to that. So we should have something fairly soon on that to share with the group, and I think it's going to be quite exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you, Craig. Susan, that's a great comment, and Bob, you made reference to this too, about how thinking has evolved. It's not just the economy, health of the economy is over here, and health of the social health is over here, and public health is over here, where everything is being intertwined and interweaved. And I think that's certainly in my own mind. If I was to reflect some of the learning that I've experienced the last couple of years, just the importance of that integration for sure.
It's just a comment, and with Craig, we can always have an offline comment about this, but there is a community safety and well-being committee that's been resurrected through the city and the United Way. And I think maybe it would be worth also intertwining with what the work that's Craig's doing, because that's got a lot of rich data and lots of surveys and lots of great stuff there.
Yeah, I would love that, Bob. One of the interesting things is we've been sort of doing the process of developing this site is the recognition that we need to help people tell their story through data and information. So I can tell my story from an economic development city employee perspective, but how do young people, how do children tell their story about the impacts? How does social service, how does everybody share that and help convey what they're feeling or what they've experienced? I think that's an important part of this process.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that every group is working on, and there's such rich data. So this safety and well-being committee that we facilitated, it's amazing the kind of information we got through that. And then if you have a body that's kind of tying it together, you see the connections and the interdependence of certain data and certain trends. So
I think of a data set like the use of the food bank. You know, like that, the number of people using our food bank should be an important indicator for our community as to its you know, viability or economic success.
yeah, we'll talk offline then.
Wonderful, thank you.
Just further to what Pavan is saying in terms of looking at what we're trying to evaluate, it seems that we've gone from a vertical model by sector and the siloed model and maybe linear thought to an ecological model, and how everybody's talked about how great it is to get together, but what we're doing is we're strengthening the pathways between our individual sectors. So how do we measure the building of those new synapses, right? That we're actually building those connections between sectors. And that, I think, is where the creativity is and recovery is going to be happening. And it's so hard because all our data sets are very sector oriented, but the strength will be the building of the pathways.
That's a great comment. Certainly, I've been looking at things as a network structure, so your analogy is very similar. That's a great comment.
Excellent. Other feedback. Sean, you had made some comments earlier on just about, you know, the longer term piece. I'm just curious if you're comfortable with this approach. Was this sort of in line with what you were thinking, or do you think there's anything we're missing?
No, I think that it puts in far greater detail and with great structure, Craig. So thank you for doing that. What I was feeling like, it's an interesting thing. I'm going to say this and understand I'm saying it very positively. There's really no recovery for a lot of sectors from this. And so the scars of this last a long time, both, you know, mentally, financially, et cetera, and all the ways that people have commented. So the idea that we sort of don't end this, but we transition this into continuing to try and grow and build strength and leverage what we've learned, I think is a brilliant statement about the evolution of the city, right? And these partners that are sitting around the table right now, and probably other partners we haven't even thought of yet. So I think to conceptualize it the way Craig did, and to be very conscious of attaching measures and milestones to it, I think takes it to another level that I would really appreciate being a part of.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks, Sean. So Craig had started off by proposing that, you know, one of our first steps would be an evaluation session where we really enunciate, you know, lessons learned, make sure that we've got, you know, our foundational principles in mind, just getting all those details right as we kind of move into this transition. And so what I was thinking is that our next meeting, which would be in 2 months, so the second Thursday in April, that we do that we have that session and talk through some of these details. Maybe Craig, you know, having taken in this feedback, if you want to also come back with you know, with just a refined transition plan, just to present back to the group, that would be great. The other thought that I had was maybe for that, if that's sort of our last formal meeting under like the KERT umbrella is before we go into that transition, I was thinking about inviting all of the other working group members to join us for that session. I wanted to get feedback from the group first before doing that. Would anyone have any strong opposition to that? Does that sound like that would be a good plan? We kind of bring everybody in for that evaluation. So basically everybody that's participated in KERT, even if it's not at the steering level, but at the working group level. Okay, I'm seeing lots of heads nod. Just wanted to make sure that would be okay.
Right. I'd only say that if we have more people, we may want to try and generate some feedback ahead of time, so that it's directed and you know, so that the meeting doesn't grow out of control. I think it's a great idea to have them. If we could get perspectives and gather them ahead of time, it might be great to even, I know everybody's time is strained, but to be able to sort through them a little bit if you had, you know, a week ahead of time, had that feedback, and then you could talk about some trends and maybe discuss the most common issues. So just a way to try and procedural suggestion more than anything else.
Oh, on
like it, Sean.
With when we did the strategic planning with Eric, he has the software that says in terms of priorities, and there might be some questions that you can do ahead of time that would give you some feedback as to where people are coming from.
That's great. I can reach out. I have some thoughts that maybe are maybe a little simpler than Eric's facilitation, but I agree with Sean. I think something ahead with some feedback and then sorting that out so that we can structure the conversations a little bit as opposed to just a wild round robin of ideas. So that's a great suggestion.
Excellent. That's great. And thanks, Craig. So what we'll do is we'll work on that. We'll send something out ahead of time, and then that will lead to what I think will be a really, really good session to review, and then to lay the foundation for the work ahead. I think that's great. Any other comments? Any other suggestions, input for us, whether it's about this step towards our next meeting or anything else from the discussions we've had today? I think it's been a great meeting and great discussion and feedback as always. Okay, well, with that, it's 10:27. I always try to end a little bit early so you guys have some time to do the many other things that I know that you all have to do. So thank you all so much, not just for today. Thank you for the last 2 years. You guys have been just amazing. And I know we're going to keep working together, but I just thought I would just share how much I appreciate all of your efforts and input. It's been just fantastic. Other than that, wish you guys a very, very happy Thursday, and we'll look forward to connecting